start by thanking JSC for giving me that really good practical example on energy optimization and on managing your chillers appropriately, which this presentation is going to cover. So as the presentation is entitled, it really is about Netcare's sustainability journey. It's a story about how our approach to sustainability has evolved over the years, with specific reference to implementing energy optimization projects. Now, sustainability is regarded as a strategic imperative by all parties, companies here today, offshore, and ourselves. But believe it or not, Netcare took quite a while in developing its business case. And the business case was developed to ensure that we could justify the expenditure of capital on these energy interventions and energy optimization projects to assist us. So our journey started specifically with governance. We were focused on what I would term the jurisprudence of governance. We were specifically focused on ensuring that every aspect about governance, local and international best practice, was covered by our attempt to comply with our sustainability initiatives. However, as mentioned, we needed to develop a business case, and a business case that justified a return on capital, that was suitably aligned to our risk management protocols, and that was justifiable in its practical outlay. And we did this by ensuring that senior management came along and owned the project. We finally developed a dedicated team of energy specialists with suitable technical skills. We employed consultants who could integrate this policy on a national basis, and we developed a 5-year strategy to be energy efficient in the most responsible fashion with appropriate returns. As mentioned, this is accompanied by detailed financial evaluation, ongoing verification, and a detailed awareness campaign that we plan to roll out next year. So that, in summation, is what the presentation is going to be focused on. As mentioned, the Sustainability Committee was formed in 2011. In fact, I drafted the original terms of reference, and in hindsight, it should have been called the King 3 Gap Committee, because essentially what we were trying to do was formulate an integrated report that told a sustainability story, and it still manages to satisfy Regulation 43 of the Companies Act in reporting to social and ethics. But here I am, I'm sounding like a lawyer, I'm sounding like a company secretary, and we haven't really graduated to where we wanted to be, which was this business case, this proper sustainable strategy that found presence throughout the group. The Sustainability Committee, during the course of this year and the last 18 months, has actually evolved extensively. The first key aspect is the fact that it is now chaired by the CEO, and it is actually akin to the Finance and Investment Committee. That means that whenever we want to spend CapEx on an energy intervention or energy efficiency project, it is presented to this committee and evaluated. It has to meet a hurdle rate. We have a lower WACC than we use at the Finance and Investment Committee. It has to guarantee an internal rate of return, and it has to have a reasonable payback period, with, of course, the sustainability message of being energy efficient. So as mentioned, the Sustainability Committee has evolved because it has all these suitable technical skills that was missing previously. And of course, it has suitable consultants that come in. And this slide talks to the fact that from a risk management perspective, you have the suitable human capital, you have the transference of skills, and more importantly, you have a national eco-efficiency approach to managing these projects. So originally, when we tried to implement sustainability, we adopted the plan, do, check approach in accordance with international best practice. But of course, we had nothing to implement because we didn't develop these energy efficient projects yet. And that was what was missing from Netcare's sustainability story. And the other aspect that was missing from Netcare's sustainability story was evidenced when we attempted to participate from a governance perspective in every possible disclosure endeavor we could find. And there were a few principles. We lacked a materiality framework. We didn't have qualitative targets. And quantitative targets. And we certainly didn't have a national approach to rolling out a process. And that, in essence, is our governance story that we sought to remedy. So in essence, this pays homage to our approach on an environmental, social, and governance perspective. We understood that environmentally we would be doing the right thing by introducing these energy initiatives. We knew it had a meaningful financial case. So from an environmental and governance perspective, our boxes were ticked. But we wanted to make sure that everything we did was aligned with our social strategy. We have a very, very detailed social and investment portfolio, and we wanted to ensure that everything we did was aligned with that. We spend in excess of 4% of our net profit after tax on our CSI initiatives, and we wanted to ensure that the people on the ground were suitably involved in these energy initiatives. And I think that we have to some extent done that. It is aligned with the UN Global Compact. We ensure that there's labor and job creation, and for example, certain energy initiatives at a hospital level from a refuse and reduction and recycling project goes to assist food farms. So we have tried to have a holistic approach in rolling out our ESG. So how have we then implemented this entire governance, environmental, social approach into our operations? Once again, we've adopted a collective approach to reduce, reuse, recycle. It has to have energy optimization. You've got to have savings. But central to this is what Netcare is about, and that's patient safety. We would never introduce any initiative that would in any way place patient safety at risk. And this is a key risk management protocol that is central to our sustainability strategy. Risk management is key. We operate in a highly regulated environment, and that has formulated our master environmental policy. It is supported by a series of standard operating procedures that are used to ensure compliance with the various regulations that govern Netcare. Our focus isn't only on energy. That would be a very short-sighted approach. Water is essential to Netcare's sustainable existence. And how we've managed water is through a detailed policy. We have introduced strict recycling measures through grey water initiatives, so all wastewater used in our national renal projects are recouped and used for gardening, of course with due regard to patient safety, because we don't want to have contamination or cross-infection occurring. We've also initiated a series of projects across the group. We have a showerhead project, and a number of water optimization projects that are underway. We recoup rainwater and do our best to be as water efficient as possible. Waste is, of course, central to any business, and with the policy that was published by the Minister of Environmental Affairs, this is obviously high on everyone's agenda to reduce landfill. But perhaps most central to Netcare's sustainability approach is its management of hazardous substances. We have to be very careful with how we process anatomical waste, sharps, etc., byproducts of pharmaceuticals, and anything that results from a hospital product, including radioactive waste. Ironically, the legislation that has just been released, and we've made detailed commentary on it, hasn't kept up with environmental imperatives, in that we could use microwave technology to manage hazardous substances, and that hasn't been included in the regulations. We have made submissions, but they still insist on using incinerators. The balance of the pillars are still in the process of being refined to ensure that our environmental and sustainability approach is suitably entrenched in green procurement and, of course, green facilities. And once again, there's another example of legislation not keeping up. All our new builds are green. We have a hospital being built in Polokwane, Pinehaven, and the new Christian Barnard Hospital. But if anyone's familiar with the regulations that govern hospitals, you will know that Regulation 158 was drafted in the 70s and has not been updated to a large extent. We, however, do use international best practice as an added cost to ensure our facilities are green. I've talked through these issues, so I'm just going to skip ahead to the innovative aspects. So what have we done to be innovative in managing energy? We've introduced something called the Enterprise Sustainability Platform. It assists us to collect data for reporting purposes, but more importantly, to assess our consumption and use. And it provides a basic measurement and verification capability. So I just want to give you a pictorial display of this. The relevance of the sustainability platform is that we're able to perform, track, and manage energy consumption at every hospital. We have 54 hospitals in our group. We have a number of Medicross facilities. We also have NRC facilities, and of course we have Netcare 911. And each one is linked to this dashboard. So at any given time, you're able to understand and assess the energy consumption at a hospital. You're also enables us from a risk perspective to intervene should there be a leak, a burst pipe, a downer on energy, and the need to set up our generators. But most importantly, and that's key to what we've done, is it's assisted us in identifying projects for development, for new interventions. Here's an example of a dashboard. You'll see that it marks our consumption, and then we're able to set a target and see how we're performing against target and budget. Because we live by the mantra that you cannot manage what you cannot measure, and that was a huge gap from a governance perspective. So we were doing everything right from a governance perspective, but you can't set targets to truly enhance your reduction in emissions until you set a baseline, and we're finally able to do that. All right, so energy partners were key in assisting us with the technical know-how, and at the same time we wanted to retain some autonomy because we didn't want to hand over the reins of our sustainability strategy to a third party. We wanted to ensure continuity and a complete understanding of what we were doing, and no one understands the hospital business better than our management. So we use them on an ad hoc basis to perform an audit of our sites. And of course, we just experienced the HVAC system failing and those 8 strategies in enhancing the management of our energy consumption across all our hospitals. And I'll get into detail about the innovative systems we've introduced in that regard. So cost management, that's key to the business case. I just want to recap of what we've done before we get to the cost management that was key in what we thought was a successful endeavor in the last 18 months. We finally built a baseline. We've identified key targets. We've audited, that has gone up to 60% of all our hospitals. Most importantly, we've developed and identified 90 projects. But more importantly, in the next 5 years, we will have 250 to 500 projects that we will roll out across the group. And you'll see the impact on our energy consumption in later slides of the relevance of that. I also want to just skip down to say that we set a target in our first year, and we've now met 80% of that target, despite spending only a fraction of the capex allocated to that. So it's the first chapter of our story, but we hope that it will improve with time. So the landscape in 2002, we will all recognize that electricity was obviously a key component in our costs, but South Africa was actually known for quite reasonably priced electricity in running a business. That landscape has completely changed in 2012 and is on an upward trajectory for the next 5 to 10 years. Electricity is a huge portion of the cost of doing business. It's a 3-pronged approach of how electricity impacts Netcare. Electricity and water is essential to our services. We're not technically an essential services because we are a private hospital group, but essentially without these resources we can't run a hospital, which means patient safety is brought into question. Of course, we have a business continuity management where we have emergency water and backup generators, but that can only go for about 5 days at a stretch. We've experienced energy blackouts and rollouts that were 2 to 5 in 2002 to something like 60 in 2014, which is significant for any operation. So we have to have a backup contingency. So our sustainability strategy was built on, firstly, reducing our consumption, 2, ensuring an innovative alternate response to energy, and we will get to that. We're looking at photovoltaic systems and alternate systems to recoup energy. And of course, the third impact is by reducing our energy, we also have a direct impact on our carbon footprint, because the key contributor to Netcare's carbon footprint is its electricity consumption. Interestingly, our our carbon footprint has decreased from 2008 to 2013 despite the expansion, and that was from just general initiatives that we implemented. So we're hoping to see an even greater, almost exponential reduction in the coming years with regards to the interventions we plan to introduce. So here's just an extrapolation. I've taken out the figures, but you can see there's been a 3 times increase in the cost of doing business in respect of electricity. What we've done is we've planned to reduce our consumption through our energy interventions, and we also plan to bank those savings. So from a business case, it makes perfect sense in terms of implementing. And of course, we hope to have additional cash flow in future years. And there you have it. I mentioned that the Sustainability Committee evaluates each energy intervention with a payback period of between 5 to 6 years. So in the next 5 to 6 years, not only will we be recouping savings, which will pay back the cost of the project, but we will be reducing our energy consumption. And after 5 to 10 years, we will be banking those savings. So it makes a perfect business case from an investment perspective, whilst resulting in a sustainable business model, whilst ensuring we're a good corporate citizen. So I just wanted to give you a few examples of our successes. These are 2 hospitals that hired highly innovative technical managers who introduced switch-off campaigns, air conditioning controls, domestic hot water projects, lift upgrades, and immediately brought down their energy consumption just from simple interventions. So the domestic hot water system was one of the innovative projects developed by Netcare's technical team. When you have large chillers, in producing cool air, it actually reduces a vast quantity of heat. We've captured this heat to contribute to the boiling of our domestic hot water in conjunction with boilers. But this is a significant reduction in the cost of doing business and an example of one of the innovative measures that we've implemented. And it has caused a rapid reduction in a very high capacity hospital like St. Anne's in Pietermaritzburg. Another innovative project is our theatre utilization. If you go to any hospital at any given time, previously the theatre air conditioning would be running 7 days a week. Now you would know that most surgeons don't operate over the weekend, so it was a complete waste of energy. We've introduced, also they don't operate late at night. Of course you have to have an emergency backup if emergency surgery is required, but we've allocated emergency theatres, and this has resulted in a mammoth reduction in our energy consumption. We've also have light sensors everywhere you go. We often sit in the dark, but a clap of a hand or two and the lights come on. And of course, retrofits together with the rebates from Eskom. We plan to also implement a business management system and a photovoltaic, which will reduce our capacity and dependency on Eskom for electricity. So that, in a nutshell, is Netcare's first chapter of its evolved sustainability journey. We realized that it needed a good governance structure, which it had. We didn't adopt a blanket approach where we handed out our IP to an independent consultant. It was to a large extent developed in-house. We have a meaningful business case that you can see produces savings and the results we needed. And there's, of course, consistent monitoring. And so collectively, you have a business case that produces a return on capital that is suitably aligned to our risk management protocols, and in essence is a sustainability story we're quite proud of. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynelle. Do we have any questions for Lynelle?
Yes.
Got one here.
Thanks for that. It's very interesting. You've talked a lot about sort of environmental sustainability, but I know with respect to healthcare globally and Untitled in South Africa, the discussion has turned somewhat, or always has been somewhat social, and the question has been raised, what is the role of private healthcare in healthcare affordability? And I think yesterday in Business Day, we just had an advertorial, asking
Correct.
medical schemes. So, but what are your thoughts around that? I know that one of the arguments is that wages are sort of a big component of the operating costs. So,
Yes.
obviously energy as well, but where, or what is Netcare, what are Netcare's thoughts around?
So the affordability debate has been raging for a few years. I mean, that's why we're facing a commission of inquiry on the topic. I think you can't look at it in those isolated blurbs that are done from the perspective of different role players. Medical schemes and the increase in the cost of medical premiums have contributed to the increased cost of healthcare. So I think they also need to determine how those premiums are derived. Secondly, pharmaceuticals and consumables and surgicals are never taken into the debate. You know, we are dictated to, those prices are dictated to by the Johnson & Johnsons and your large pharmaceutical players. We have a rolled out initiative that, subject to doctors' discretion, generic medicines are the preferred alternative. And we've engaged in a massive standardization campaign across our hospitals to reduce costs. But I think the debate, I'm just giving you a very superficial debate on a very complex topic.
Netcare hasn't sort of developed strategies, or there isn't sort of deliberate projects or anything around this?
Yeah, there is. There's, you know, we've been involved in DRG models, which is accompanied by standardization to bring down the cost per event. And that has gone a long way to reducing the costs per event. But, you know, that's an isolated case, and you've got to have the medical schemes sign on to those, when in fact medical schemes prefer a fee-for-service approach to dealing with medicine. And a fee-for-service is generally a more expensive mechanism. Okay, so it's a very complex debate, and I think we've got to leave it to the economists and watch what the inquiry is going to say.
Hi, I'm Mandy from Kahiso Asset Management. Just on you said you reached almost 80% of the targets you set for yourself.
Yep.
What were the targets? Just give us some color.
So we set a target of about 10 million rand. So we've saved 8 million, but those are just indicative costs, and we haven't really got to year end yet. But remember, it was for a rollout.
10 million rand per annum from 2008?
Cumulative savings across the group. Yeah.
And in terms of energy reduction on a kilowatt per hour?
I don't have that information, sorry. The technical chap was going to accompany me today, but unfortunately he isn't here. But I'm happy to come back to you with that information.
Okay, thanks. I'd appreciate that.
Do we have any other questions? There's one there and one there.
Just coming back to the inquiry into healthcare costs. As far as I understand now, the dispute between yourselves and KPMG, is that completely out of the way, and there are going to be no more delays from Netcare's side regarding that inquiry?
So I think that the issue with KPMG, and it has been ventilated in the press extensively, it had nothing to do with delaying the inquiry. It had to do with the conflict of interest and the fact that you appointed a professional services firm to provide you with professional services, yet they engaged an individual without advising us while having privy to all our IP. So the judgment was handed down. We lost the appeal to request KPMG to comply with the consent order that was handed down in October, which required them to provide affidavits, which they didn't do, which provided them to monitor information, which they didn't do. So it's quite a complex debate, and I think that if you have a chance to read Judge Matujane's judgment, you should actually, to give you a full perspective. Interestingly, it was almost a copy and paste of the heads of argument of KPMG's legal counsel, and we're contemplating our current position as to whether to appeal the judgment or not. Any appeal would run contemporaneously with the Commission of Inquiry, so I don't think that that would result in a delay. But I wish to reiterate that our actions there were to secure our position, our IP, and our confidential information, and had nothing to do with delaying the inquiry. That was an inevitable concomitant of those legal proceedings, which should be attributed to the actions of KPMG and not Netcare.
This is Kolisa from PRI. Excuse me. My question is almost a follow-up from the first one from Anne-Marie. It's looking at, I'd like to get an indication of how you approach your stakeholder engagement. Because you mentioned that, there are certain issues that are left out of debate because they're seen in isolation. But obviously they do affect you as a business. So how do you then approach engagement with the pharmaceuticals and the various medical schemes? Are you being proactive about it, or basically how do you do it?
Yeah, so we have 6 to 8 stakeholders. One of them are suppliers, which would include pharmaceutical companies, and of course the other are funders. Tariff negotiation happens on an annual basis, so we negotiate with the medical schemes on an annual basis. We also attempt to showcase our clinical initiatives to enhance our clinical management of cases and positive outcomes from that perspective. So we engage with them on that basis, and obviously to formulate innovative products and how tariff can be packaged. So we do, it happens on an annual basis, more so through the BHF conferences and the like. With pharmaceuticals, we also liaise with suppliers. Like I mentioned, the Pharmaceutical Act allows you to have a logistics service within a hospital, which certainly brings down the price of sourcing and managing drugs. But the use of drugs is ultimately at the discretion of the health professional. You cannot tell a doctor what to prescribe if he thinks it's in the best interests of the patient. We can only advise that generics can enhance the costs, but ultimately the relationship between the doctor and a hospital is a very independent, arm's length one. They're not employed by us, so we can't control that aspect of costs. Okay.
Thanks, Mike Davis from Kagoda. I think your wage agreement comes up for review next year, and there's been some limited strike action in the last two-year wage bargaining agreements. So I was just wondering, given the current situation of labour unrest in other sectors, what might be Netcare's expectations, any early indications of engagement with unions currently?
So Netcare is a highly unionised environment, and we proactively engage with all our unions, but I think it's too early to tell. It's a macro factor that could influence the response of the unions we deal with, but that would be purely speculative.